Today we're going to start a process where we eventually will learn how to do what's called a proof. And a proof involves what's called mathematical logic. And to do that, we want to start with a conditional statement. So this is our first step towards doing proofs. But we have a few steps before we actually get there. So first of all, a conditional statement is something that a lot of times we just call an if-then statement because it can be written in that form. Basically, a conditional statement is anything that can be written as if blank, then blank. And that's exactly what a condition is. A condition is something that has to happen in order for something else to happen. So the if part needs to happen in order for the then part to happen. Now, one thing about conditional statements, just because they can be written in if-then form, doesn't mean that they automatically are. And that can be a little bit tricky. I can give you a conditional statement that is not in if-then form, but it can be rewritten that way. And we're going to do that for our first example today. So I said, this actually is a conditional statement. But I kind of made it tricky. I didn't write it in if-then form. So what I want you guys to do is just pause the video for a second, see if you can rewrite this sentence in if-then form, if blank, then blank, and then I'll give you my answer. Okay, so hopefully you guys did that. I hope you guys actually paused the video and came up with your answer. Here's my answer here. And now I said this is one good answer. It's not the only one, but this is my answer. The original statement was, I take my umbrella when it rains. So I wanted to say if blank, then blank. So I said, if it rains, then I will take my umbrella. That's in if-then form. Now both of those sentences basically say the same thing. And they're both conditional statements, but I just wanted to rewrite it so it was in if-then form. All right, our next vocab word for today is converse. And a converse is when you take an if-then statement and you switch the if-then parts, the if part with the then part. Now, the one thing I want to make sure you guys understand about converses is that they are not always true. Just because an if-then statement is true doesn't mean its converse is true. So here's my statement from before. If it rains, then I will take my umbrella. And let's say we wanted to write the converse of it. So what I do is I basically take the if part, which is it's going to rain, and I take the then part, I'm going to take my umbrella, and I switch those two things. Now notice I didn't just switch them and copy them word for word. I didn't say, if I will take my umbrella, then it rains. Because that doesn't really make sense. Like the English language of it doesn't make sense. So I reworded it a little bit, but I took the concept. I said, if I take my umbrella, then it's raining out. And that way it's like, it makes sense language-wise. You know, you don't just recopy the exact words and switch their spots, because sometimes it sounds fun. All right, so the next question is, remember I said converses are not always true. Converses can be true, but they're not automatically true. So the next question is this statement always true? And you guys can pause the video and think about it and come up with your answer. And here's my answer. So I said, no, it's not always true. Some people take an umbrella to protect them from the sun. Maybe it's really, really hot out. And people go, I don't want to get sunburned today. So they take an umbrella to the beach. And they sit under the umbrella so they don't get sunburned. So no, the statement, every time I take my umbrella means it's raining, is not true. There are other reasons to take an umbrella. Or another good one would be to say, maybe you looked outside and you thought, it looks like it might rain today, so I better take my umbrella. So you take your umbrella because you think it might rain, but then it doesn't rain. That's the same thing. So no, that statement is not always true. And what we just did is a very important concept called giving a counterexample. Now, an example is something that shows something is true. A counterexample, counter kind of means the opposite of, Counterexample means it's an example that something is not true. Now, if you can show even one counterexample, any one time when a statement is not true, then we say that statement is not true, period. And that's one of the things you guys are going to do in today's assignment. You're going to take a look at some examples, some if-then statements. I'm going to ask you if they're true. And if they are true, you say, yeah, they're true. And if they're not, you're going to give a counterexample, which is an example that shows it's not true. Now, let's say we have an if-then statement where the if-then statement itself is true and its converse is also true. Because we said that can happen. It said it doesn't automatically happen, but it can. So if a statement and its converse are both true, the vocab word for that, we call it a biconditional statement. Bi means two. So it's saying we have two conditional statements. The original one and the converse one are both true conditional statements. Now, we use the phrase if and only if to show a biconditional statement. So if you want to write a biconditional statement, if you know that the original statement itself and the converse are both true, instead of saying if then, you can say one of them, and then say those words, if and only if, the other one. And that means it's a biconditional statement. One example of that, usually when that happens, it's when you're talking about two things that are the same. So like, let's say we took a test in class, and I said, if I get over 90% on this test, then I get an A. And then you switch it around, and you say, well, if I got an A on this test, then I got over 90%. Those things are both true. So that's a biconditional statement. And what you could say is, I got 90% or better on my test if and only if I got an A, because those two things are basically the same. Now, one last little thing. Sometimes in textbooks, or I might do it in the notes every once in a while, we use this funny looking word. It looks like a typo. It looks like I meant to say if, but I accidentally typed an extra F. It's not a typo. It's a shorthand notation for if and only if. So if you ever see that word, that funny looking word that looks like the word if with an extra F on it, IFF, that actually means if and only if. And that's a shorthand notation for that.